Hi, I'm Mayor Mike Walsh, and I'd like to welcome you to the Mayor's Corner. This is a program where we provide viewers with information about city government, pertinent issues, and things that may be of interest within our community. I will be interviewing individuals in an effort to give a first-hand perspective of concepts, ideas, and involvements of a particular subject. The topic for this episode is the Building Inspection Department of the City of De Pere. And my guest is Dave Hungisto, Chief Building Inspector and Assistant Assessor. Welcome, Dave, and thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Oh, great. Dave, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your history with the City of De Pere.
I attended Gogebic Community College in Ironwood, Michigan, majoring in building construction. Likewise at Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan, majoring in building construction, and I finished with a Bachelor of Science degree from Northern Michigan University in industrial education with a minor in woodworking. After that, I was employed by the City of Hancock for 2.5 years. I was in charge of a HUD housing rehab program where people could get their homes fixed up. This was a grant through the federal government. And then once that position ended, I started with the City of De Pere March 5th, 1984. And obviously that's almost 33 years ago. So I have been here for quite a while. I've seen a lot of changes, and it's a good place to be.
So what is your function today as the building inspector and assistant assessor?
Well, mainly there's a lot of people contact, citizens, architects, contractors, just to name a few, and we being the inspection department work very closely in making sure projects are designed properly from the beginning, and then we issue building permits and then follow up with the inspections, which lead finally to a certificate of occupancy.
So what's the difference between what you do as assessor and accurate appraisal?
Accurate appraisal is the statutory assessor for the City of De Pere. They are contracted by the city, and they have functioned in their position since 2005, which was the city's last reassessment. I am certified with the Department of Revenue as an Assessor 1, and so basically I oversee accurate appraisal and work closely with them in the establishment of assessment values for properties, residential and commercial. The Department of Revenue places assessments on manufacturing properties.
So accurate appraisal basically does the assessing within the City of De Pere?
Yes.
And you oversee that?
Yes, they do, yes.
You told me once before that you have a philosophy about your work and how you approach it.
Yes, our position, obviously a building inspector is an enforcer, but I believe using my teaching degree, I look at the position that we are more than an enforcer, we are an educator. And I found that the more you educate people right from the beginning of whatever project, very seldom do you have to enforce. So it works good, and homeowners, contractors feel comfortable calling, asking questions, and instead of being afraid of the building inspector.
So you not only do the assessing and look at the way things are done, but you also have to use some common sense, I would think.
Common sense is very important. I live in a world full of regulations, and all regulations have some gray areas, but the common sense goes very, very far when you're working with any type of issue. So,
Dave, the building inspection department is a little unique. Could you kind of tell us why that is?
The uniqueness is that we work very closely with property owners, and we do a lot of our work while doing inspections in their turf, in their own home, and which is a lot different than some departments that are on the exterior.
Can you give us an idea as to what the building inspection department is responsible for?
Well, as our mission statement states, it's to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and general public while maintaining neighborhood aesthetics and property values.
What about an overview of the employees within your department?
We have, in addition to myself, a number of excellent employees, people with great people skills. I have an assistant, Dennis Jensen, and Dennis has been with the city for about 11 years. We have Bob Gerbers is a commercial part-time electrical inspector. Bob has been with us for about 17 years. And then we have Al Farver, who functions as a part-time commercial plumbing inspector, and Al has been with the city for approximately 8 years. And we also have, as an administrative assistant, Carrie Danon, very, very great person that keeps us guys in order.
Oh, you need somebody like that all the time, don't you?
Yes, we do.
You had mentioned earlier also about your department has a lot of regulations. Could you give us an idea what type of regulations and codes that you do enforce?
We have, starting out with the city of De Pere, we have the housing code, and which basically addresses minimum standards of existing houses. We enforce regulations from the state of Wisconsin, the Uniform Dwelling Code for 1 and 2 family dwellings, and then also the Commercial Building Code, which pertains to commercial buildings, manufacturing buildings, schools. And then last, we have some federal regulations that we end up enforcing, and those are a little more entwined with the state Commercial Building Code as far as handicap accessibility and those types of regulations.
Do you have anything to do with building plans themselves or issuing of building permits?
Yes, we review plans for everything for 1 and 2 family dwellings. We review the plans, issue permits. Commercial and manufacturing buildings and schools, those plans are reviewed by the Department of Safety and Professional Services. And once those plans are approved, we then can issue permits for them.
What about other departments within the city? Do you work with any of them closely? You mentioned plans. Maybe you have something to do with the planning department, or?
Yes, as functioning as a zoning administrator, I work very closely with the Director of Planning and Economic Development, Kim Flum. And we also work closely with the Health Department, and then also very closely with the Fire Department, namely Assistant Chief Al Matsky, in doing commercial inspections along with light inspections for liquor license renewals of taverns and restaurants.
Some of these you had mentioned about the plans, but when we get a developer that comes into the community and wants to put up some type of development, whether it's commercial or residential, do you work very closely with them?
We work closely with the developer, going initially right from the concept of the proposed development to hopefully walking the project along, provided it's a viable project. And we give guidance to the developer to basically walk them through the various steps of government and the committees to ultimately get their approvals.
You also deal with landlords and tenants. Could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, please?
We deal with landlords and tenants. Typically, it's on a complaint basis. There are times where tenants will call and complain about landlords and about conditions in existing, typically in a residence. And generally, in most cases, there tends to be some type of a feud, unfortunately, between the two parties. But what we will do is have the tenant put down in writing what the perceived code violations are, and then the inspection department will go do an inspection, and if there are code violations, we will issue orders to the property owner and then require code compliance.
And if they don't comply, what do you do?
If they don't comply, then unfortunately we take off our kid gloves and I say we play hardball with the landlord, and we will issue citations. And generally when citations are issued, that will get the landlord motivated to correct the issues.
But you do try to get the some type of adherence to the code and try to get the landlord tenant to resolve the dispute before you go to that length.
Definitely, going back to educating, we explain that the concerns to the property owner, and in most cases they will comply. It's just a few that force us to send them over to the municipal court judge.
As part of your work, you also deal with condemnation. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, in my tenure here, I have probably condemned about 25 houses. They have been scattered throughout the city. It's not a fun project, but sometimes I have to do that to protect people from themselves for their own health. And I learned actually is that sometimes making a person homeless for a while it sounds crude, actually it leads them to improving their life. And I can document 4 cases where the condemnation actually saved the people's lives.
Well, it also helps in keeping up the quality of life within the community too.
It does. That's a good point. And right now I can say that in the entire city of De Pere, there are no bad neighborhoods. And generally what happens is when a house is condemned and a property is torn down, ultimately a new residence is built, which helps the aesthetics of the neighborhood and helps enhance property values of not only that property but surrounding neighbors.
Dave, you had mentioned about building permits a little bit earlier, and what projects would a homeowner specifically need a building permit?
Some of the common ones are fences. Fence permits are required just so that they are placed in the right location on the property, the right height. We issue permits for detached accessory buildings, which are sheds, garages. We do permits for swimming pools. Swimming pools to me are very important because they can present a danger to a neighborhood, and we do not have any leeway for swimming pools. Unfortunately, there are stores that sell the inflatable blow-up pools, like the blue ones, and those pools need a fence permit, just like any other pool, be it an above-ground pool or an underground pool, in-ground pool. But those are extremely dangerous when they're not fenced in, and we look at the pools very closely because they are, while they're a pleasure for a family to have, they are also a potential hazard to danger for abutting children. Overhead wiring has to be a minimum of 10 feet measured horizontally from the edge of the pool. Underground wiring has to be a minimum of 5 feet away from the edge of the pool. And then we have our fence requirements, which are a minimum of 4 feet to a maximum of 6 feet. And then we have specific regulations to the type of construction of those fences. We also issue permits for siding, soffits, additions or alterations to houses. When there's alterations, we're looking for structural integrity of any members that may be cut, and then we look very closely at bedrooms and basements. That is one area, Mayor, where people probably just don't think. You can have a rec room in a basement without windows, but if you put a bedroom in a basement, you have to have a window in the bedroom. There has to be 2 forms of egress from that bedroom. One can be a set of stairs going to the second or to the first floor, and the second would be the window would have to be an egress to get out in case of a fire. So we do look at those very closely. We also make sure that there are smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors placed in the bedrooms, and it's all for the safety of the person sleeping in a basement. We issue permits for electrical, plumbing, HVAC. Another one that we look very close at our fireplaces, wood fireplaces, gas fireplaces. There are a lot of regulations that pertain to the hooking up of the gas, clearances from combustibles, and we want to make sure that they're installed safely. There are other permits, sign permits we issue, and those come in on a regular basis, and then there's a variety of smaller minor permits.
I think one of the things, or a couple of the things that people might be interested in is the deck and the sheds, because those are pretty common, I think, and maybe some people don't realize that they need to get permits for that. Could you give us a little information on that?
I believe there are a number of people that actually will put them up without a permit, and it's not intentional on their part. They just don't realize that a permit is required. As far as a shed, a fence, we just want to make sure that they are placed in a proper location with the correct setbacks from property lines. They have to be located in a rear yard. And then decks, we look to make sure that they are on proper footings And then depending on the height from grade, that they have the appropriate guardrails and handrails installed on them.
People might wonder that we have so many permits that we issue. What is the reasons for that?
Well, the main reason is for the majority of our permits is to provide safety for the owners of the residents, and then the remaining permits are just for orderly development of houses as they're being expanded or remodeled.
A reason for requiring like a shed or a deck to have a permit, aren't there codes or something that have to be followed in order to do that? I mean, a person might just think, well, okay, I want to put up a shed I want to store my stuff in there. But you just can't go ahead and build it. There are a couple of regulations that you have to follow.
There are for sheds. Probably the main thing, in addition to the setbacks, is that we don't have a shed located too close to a house. The code says a minimum of 5 feet. Realistically, it should be 10 feet, just for fire separations reasons, because sheds typically have lawn mowers with gas, snow blowers with gas cans, and more combustibles. So that is probably the biggest reason for the setback from the residents.
I know that you certainly help out residents by providing them with information and education to help ensure that their projects are completed successfully. Do you work with the commercial buildings in De Pere also?
Yes, we work with, starting back from what I said previously, with developers. Once those plans are approved by the City Plan Commission and the state of Wisconsin, we have very close contact with the architects, the contractors, which would be the general contractor, and all of the mechanical contractors doing inspections on the buildings. So we do a number of inspections on the buildings as they go up.
What are some of the other tasks that the building inspection department is responsible for?
Oh, we keep an eye on home occupations. Home occupations are basically if somebody has an office in their home, is one that is permitted. I guess the big goal of watching home occupations is that we do not introduce commercial business traffic into a residential neighborhood. We also issue permits for expansions of driveways. We do get complaints about garbage, debris, junk piled on side of a house. Sometimes there's junk cars, and that's where we will issue orders to the property owner. If it's a rental, we will send an order to the owner and also copy the tenant. So we do, in all of our inspections, look sharply at smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. They are required in all residential structures, no matter what age the house is. As of 2011, the building code was changed to require new construction to have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors be hardwired with electrical wiring, basement, first floor, second floor, have a battery backup, and that if one smoke detector goes off, you will hear them on all floor levels. That is very cheap insurance, and we look keenly for that on all of our inspections.
You also help when a person comes in and is looking to put up a fence or a shed or just some type of things in their yard. You also help them in determining where their lot lines are so that they can be in accordance with the code. How do you do it, and exactly what do you do?
Well, most people have a general idea where their property line is located, and if somebody is going to be doing a project where they need to know where the lot line is for determining setbacks from it, I will look at their address, their legal description. There's times I will take out a copy of the plat and to find the dimensions of it, and then also I will look at a mapping system that we have on the computer. It's called DIME, and it is very helpful. It gives dimensions. You can there's a measuring tool on it. That DIME is actually located, excuse me, under maps on the City of De Pere's website, and that many times assists property owners in finding their property pins. There are some times in the older sections of the city where the subdivisions were platted decades ago that sometimes you may not be able to find a property pin, and then if somebody really needs to know where the property line is, they would have to contact a surveyor.
I know you function also as the zoning administrator. Could you kind of tell us what that entails?
As a zoning administrator, I enforce the zoning code. The zoning code, basically the city is divided into different sections. We have residential zoning districts, obviously where residential construction can be located. So there's an R1 district, there's an R2, which allows for single or two family, R3, which allows for multifamily, R4 is a general office residence district, which is, there are not many of those in the city. And then there are zoning classifications in business. There's B1, there's B2, B3, which basically are gas stations. And then there are industrial districts, I1, I2, I3. And under each one of these zoning classifications, there are permitted uses. For instance, the B1, I believe, has about 100 permitted uses. If somebody comes in and has a permitted use, they are allowed to do that without any special approvals. If there's also are conditional uses, and if a property or a project or use, I should say, is listed as a conditional use, then the person looking to do the project will have to fill out a conditional use permit application, go before the City Plan Commission for approval, and then ultimately before the City Council for approval of a conditional use permit. Also with rezoning, if somebody wants to take a property and rezone it, as an example, from residential to business, if it appears to meet our comprehensive plan, we would then have the individual apply for a petition to rezone the property, and again that would go to the Plan Commission, and then ultimately the City Council at a public hearing for rezoning. The overall intent of the zoning code is to provide orderly growth throughout the city, and I believe the city has done a good job of that.
I know the City of De Pere has a zoning board of appeals. Will you kind of tell our viewers a bit about that board and how it ties in with your department?
The Zoning Board of Appeals is a board created by state statute. It consists of citizen members that are appointed by the mayor. The chairman is Tom Kaidatz. Tom has been the chairman for well over 30 plus years. He is an attorney, and he is very good at guiding the board members. The Zoning Board of Appeals basically is established to grant variances when certain areas of the zoning code create a hardship on a particular property. And for instance would be if somebody lives in an older section, typically, both in East De Pere or West De Pere, where the lots are either 60 by 120 or 50 by 120, and they have a garage that was built 60, 70 years ago, and it was, at the time, there was a 2-foot side yard setback, and the people want to tear it down and construct a new code or a new garage. The current regulations, which are state that it should be 6 feet from the side lot line or 4 feet from the rear lot line, can create a hardship in the reconstruction of that garage. So in cases like that, we have the property owner or contractor apply for a variance and go before the Board of Appeals. The main thing is to show that there is something unique about the property. There's a hardship due to topography, which isn't too much in the city of De Pere because we're pretty flat. But the biggest thing, I think, is that the smaller lots are existing substandard lots of record, which make them qualify for variances.
Dave, we recently put in some money to do something new as far as the city of De Pere goes, and that has to do with the revaluation that we always do every 5 to 10 years. Could you kind of give us a little insight as to what that is going to entail?
Yes. For historical purposes, the city of De Pere has had reassessments done back in 1969, 1985, 1998, and the most recent was 2005. Accurate appraisal, as I stated, the statutory assessor for the city did their reval, and that's when they will go into all buildings to do measurements, look at the quality of the construction, and come up with property values. Since then, what they do is they will look at the building permits for each year, and as of January 1st, which is the assessment date in the state of Wisconsin, they will do partial assessments and full assessments on properties that have been completed. And so that process since 2005 has been called maintenance. What the city of De Pere is doing differently this year is Accurate Appraisal is going to be doing a little bit further. They are going to be reviewing sales of properties. One area that will need some adjustment will be commercially zoned properties. Values have obviously changed since 2005. And so they will be looking at real estate transactions and coming up with new values, trying to update the percentage of assessments that's determined by the Department of Revenue.
So it'll basically do away with the reval every 5 to 10 years. We'll be kind of currently always at what the value should be?
That's correct. That's the intent, is to try to keep the value around 100% every year versus waiting 10, 15 years for a reval. That's too long. And at the moment, the assessment company will not be going into people's houses to look at the attributes of the house. But in case there may be some cases where something just doesn't jive, they possibly may look at it, but for the most part, that work will be done from their office.
And how will that be done, Dave?
It'll be all done through with their computer. They have a software system for pricing out properties, and once that is completed, then anybody having a change of a property value will receive a notice from Accurate Appraisal, and there will be an open book meeting. The open book meeting generally happens around about May, but at that time I stress to the general public that it's important to come in to the open book hearing, whether you have a change of value or not. The property owner knows their property best, and at times an error can be made. Assessors are people, and but it is informal, the open book meeting, and you get to sit with the assessor and look at the values and have a discussion. There will be some times where the property owner will present some information that would authorize Accurate Appraisal to make an adjustment to the value. There will be some times where Accurate will stick to their guns and say, no, that is the value. If that's the case, then the property owner has the opportunity to go before the Board of Review. That is a formal board that meets once a year. And to appear before the board, the assessor is presumed correct, and the petitioner, the property owner, has to present sufficient evidence to the board for their review to see if the value would be changed. And typically people are asking it to be lowered.
So if it does go up, without the assessor going in to check it out, how is that done through what building permits are issued to that property?
Yeah, they look very closely at the building permits. They will also have neighborhood zones where they try to classify certain style houses into one group, certain businesses into another group, and they break the city apart, and that assists them in applying their values.
Well, Dave, we're just about out of time, but before we go, where can residents go to get more information as to what they have to do as far as getting permits, what they have to do as far as your department goes?
We have information on the city website, www.depere.org. We have a Facebook page. My assistant Dennis has recently put some interesting information on decks on that page, along with some presentations from some seminars that we've been at. It's very, very educational. And then obviously folks can email, can give us a phone call, or stop in first floor City Hall. And we look forward to helping everybody that walks through the door.
Well, good. Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just would like to say that it's a pleasure working for the city of De Pere. De Pere is a nice, clean community, good people, and I'm fortunate to have a job that I love.
Well, that's great. Well, we're glad to have you here, Dave, and I know you've been here a long time, 30 plus years, so we certainly appreciate the work that you've done and continue to do. And I'd also like to thank you for taking the time to provide our viewers with the information about the Building Inspection Department with the City of De Pere. This concludes another episode of the Mayor's Corner. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this is Mayor Mike Walsh.